The mayor's sleek town car pulled up to Frank Rodriguez's rundown garage at the edge of Millfield. Frank wiped his oil-stained hands on his equally stained work pants, confused by the unexpected visit. The distinguished man in the tailored suit stepped out, followed by the shy teenager who had been coming to the garage every day after school for the past 3 weeks. Frank had never imagined that the quiet girl learning to change oil filters and rotate tires was connected to the most powerful person in the city. Now, as the mayor extended his hand with tears in his eyes, Frank realized the small kindnesses he'd shown a curious teen were about to change. Not just her life, but the entire neighborhood he'd called home for 20 years. "Mr. Rodriguez," the mayor said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've given my daughter something no private school or tutor ever could, and now, I want to help you give that same gift to every kid in the city. In the city. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments." Morning light filtered through the grimy windows of Rodriguez Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The small garage sat at the corner of Elm and Mason Streets, in a part of Millfield that tourists never visited and city officials conveniently forgot existed. Frank Rodriguez had owned the place for nearly 20 years, buying it with the modest savings he'd accumulated during his time as a mechanic for the city's public works department. The building wasn't much to look at, with its faded red brick exterior and hand-painted sign that had weathered so many seasons it was barely legible. But to Frank, it represented everything he had worked for, everything he believed in. At 45, Frank's dark hair had begun to gray at the temples, and deep lines etched the corners of his eyes. His hands, calloused and perpetually stained with engine grease, told the story of a life spent working with machines. He moved with the deliberate efficiency of someone who understood that time was both a commodity and a luxury, especially for a small business owner struggling to stay afloat in an economy that increasingly favored big chains and corporate convenience. This particular Tuesday morning had started like most others. Frank had arrived before dawn, unlocked the rolling metal door, and begun work on Mrs. Guzman's ancient Toyota that needed a new timing belt. The radio played softly in the background, tuned to the local station that played a mix of classic rock and blues. The familiar routine brought a certain comfort, even as the ever-present worry about making ends meet lurked at the edges of his consciousness. Business had been slow for months. The new Quick Lube franchise that had opened on the main street offered special deals and flashy promotions that Frank couldn't match. His loyal customers, mostly older residents who had been coming to him for years, weren't enough to sustain the garage. Each month, it became harder to pay the bills, to order parts, to keep the lights on. Frank had begun to consider the possibility that he might have to close the shop, find work at one of the larger garages across town, surrender the independence that had defined his adult life. As he worked, Frank periodically glanced out the open bay door, taking in the familiar sights of the neighborhood. The corner bodega where he bought his lunch most days, the bus stop where workers gathered each morning, the small park across the street where neighborhood kids played basketball on a cracked concrete court. These were the landmarks of his life, the backdrop to 2 decades of honest work and quiet dignity. It was during one of these glances that Frank first noticed her, a teenage girl standing on the opposite sidewalk, partially hidden behind a telephone pole. She wore the uniform of the private academy on the other side of town, navy blazer and plaid skirt, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Something about her posture caught his attention, the way she seemed both interested in the garage and hesitant to approach it. Frank returned his focus to the timing belt, aligning the markings carefully. When he looked up again a few minutes later, the girl was still there, watching. It wasn't unusual for people to observe him working, especially children who found cars fascinating, but something about this girl's persistent presence made him curious. She didn't appear to be waiting for a bus or meeting someone. She was simply watching, with an intensity that suggested genuine interest rather than mere curiosity. After another 20 minutes passed with no change, Frank straightened, stretched his back, and walked to the garage entrance. The girl immediately tensed, as if preparing to leave. "Hey there," Frank called across the street, his voice friendly but not intrusive. "You need some help with something?" The girl hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to another. She looked to be about 15 or 16, with a serious face and dark eyes that seemed older than her years. "No," she called back after a moment. "Just watching. Sorry if that's weird." Frank smiled, recognizing the awkward self-consciousness of adolescence. "Not weird at all. You interested in cars?" Another hesitation, then a small nod. "Kind of. I like seeing how things work." Frank recognized something in her expression, a genuine curiosity that reminded him of himself at that age, before circumstances and necessity had channeled his mechanical interests into a profession. "I'm changing a timing belt right now. Pretty interesting job, if you want to come take a closer look." The girl glanced up and down the street, as if checking for observers, then cautiously crossed over to the garage. As she drew closer, Frank could see that her uniform, though clearly expensive, was slightly rumpled, and there was a small ink stain on one cuff of her white shirt. She carried a leather backpack that looked almost too heavy for her slender frame. "I'm Frank," he said, extending a hand, then withdrawing it with a sheepish smile when he remembered it was covered in grease. "Frank Rodriguez, this is my shop." "I'm Olivia," the girl replied, her voice quiet but clear. She didn't offer a last name, and Frank didn't ask. Teenagers often had their reasons for keeping certain details to themselves. "Nice to meet you, Olivia. You go to Westridge Academy?" Frank gestured to her uniform. Olivia nodded, glancing down at her blazer as if just remembering what she was wearing. "Yeah. It's a few blocks from here." Frank knew the school well, though only from the outside. Westridge Academy was one of the most prestigious private schools in the city, with tuition costs that exceeded what most families in his neighborhood earned in a year. The contrast between the elegant campus, with its manicured lawns, and the struggling commercial district where his garage stood, was a stark reminder of Millfield's sharp economic divides. "So, what's got you interested in auto repair?" Frank asked, leading the way back to the Toyota. "Not exactly what they teach at Westridge, I'm guessing." A small smile flickered across Olivia's face. "No, they have robotics and computer science, but nothing practical like this. I just think it's important to know how to fix things. My dad's car broke down last month, and we had to wait 2 hours for roadside assistance. I felt so useless." Frank nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. Nothing worse than being stuck with a problem you don't know how to solve. "Tell you what, since you're interested, I'll show you what I'm doing here. This timing belt connects the crankshaft to the camshaft. Make sure all the engine components move in the right sequence. When it breaks, the whole car stops working." To his surprise, Olivia stepped closer, her eyes focused intently on the engine components as he pointed them out. She asked intelligent questions, demonstrating a basic understanding of mechanical principles that suggested she had done some reading on the subject. For the next 15 minutes, Frank explained what he was doing as he completed the timing belt replacement, finding an unexpected satisfaction in her attentive presence. "What about oil changes?" Olivia asked suddenly. "That's something people should know how to do themselves, right?" Frank considered this. "Absolutely. It's one of the simplest maintenance tasks, but a lot of people never learn it. Pay shops like Quick Lube $50 for something they could do themselves for 20. Could you? Olivia hesitated, her confidence faltering. "Could you show me how to do that sometime? Change oil, I mean." The request surprised Frank. Most teenagers these days seemed more interested in their phones than in learning practical skills. "Sure, I could do that. I've got an oil change scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Honda Civic. Nothing complicated. You could stop by after school if you want." Olivia's face brightened. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "Not at all. Always good to pass on knowledge, especially practical stuff like this. Just stop by whenever you get out of school. I'm here till 6 most days." "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I'll definitely come tomorrow." Olivia glanced at her watch, a slim silver timepiece that probably cost more than Frank's monthly rent. "I should go now. I have a math tutor at 4. "Call me Frank," he said, watching as she adjusted her heavy backpack. "And don't worry about getting your uniform dirty tomorrow." Might want to bring a change of clothes if you can. Oil changes can get messy. Olivia nodded, a hint of excitement in her expression. I will. Thanks again, Frank. As she walked away, Frank found himself wondering about this unusual teenager who would rather learn about car maintenance than whatever extracurricular activities Westridge Academy offered its privileged students. He didn't, expect her to actually return the next day. These impulsive interests of young people often evaporated as quickly as they formed, but he found himself hoping she would. To his surprise, Olivia did return the following afternoon, arriving just after 3:30 with her school backpack and a small gym bag. She had exchanged her uniform for jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The transformation made her look more like the teenagers from the neighborhood, though there was still something in her posture and speech that marked her as different. You came back, Frank said, unable to hide his surprise as she entered the garage. I said I would, Olivia replied, with a slight defensiveness that suggested she was used to having her word questioned. So you did. Well, the Civic just came in about an hour ago. You ready to get your hands dirty? Olivia nodded, a determined expression replacing her usual reserved demeanor. Absolutely. Frank led her to the car, a well-maintained Honda belonging to Mr. Patel from the pharmacy down the street. First rule of any repair job. Safety, he began, reaching for a pair of nitrile gloves. Oil can be caustic, and engines are hot. Always protect yourself. He handed Olivia a pair of gloves, noticing how carefully she put them on, smoothing each finger into place with a precision that spoke of someone accustomed to following instructions exactly. For the next hour, Frank guided her through the process of changing the oil, explaining each step in detail, from positioning the drain pan to removing the filter, from measuring the correct amount of new oil to checking for leaks. What impressed him most was Olivia's focus. She didn't check her phone once, didn't sigh with boredom or glance at the clock. She paid attention to every detail, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely pleased when her hands became smudged with oil despite the gloves. You're a natural, Frank commented, as she carefully tightened the drain plug to his specified torque. Got a good feel for it. Olivia looked up, a rare smile transforming her serious face. Really? I was afraid I'd mess something up. Nope, you're doing great. Some people are just good with their hands, have that mechanical intuition. Can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. The praise seemed to affect Olivia deeply. She ducked her head, focusing intently on wiping excess oil from the filter housing. But not before Frank caught sight of the pleased flush that colored her cheeks. He wondered, not for the first time, what her life at Westridge Academy was like, whether she received much encouragement there. As they finished the oil change, checking and double-checking their work, Olivia grew more animated, asking about other basic maintenance tasks, expressing interest in learning more. What about tomorrow? She asked, as she carefully disposed of the used oil in Frank's recycling container. Could I come back? Maybe you could show me how to change a tire? Frank considered his schedule. He had a brake job and an alternator replacement, but nothing that would take his full attention. Sure, if you want. Changing a tire is definitely something everyone should know how to do. Great! Olivia's enthusiasm was unmistakable now. Same time? Works for me. Maybe we can do spark plugs after the tire change, if you're interested. Definitely interested, Olivia confirmed, gathering her belongings. Thank you, Frank. This was really cool. As he watched her leave, Frank felt a warmth in his chest that had been absent for some time. Teaching had never been part of his professional plans. But there was something deeply satisfying about passing on his knowledge, especially to someone who valued it so clearly. The next day unfolded in a similar pattern. Olivia arrived promptly after school, changed into casual clothes, and absorbed Frank's lessons with an enthusiasm that made the instruction a pleasure rather than a chore. She proved to be a quick study, her hands becoming more confident with each task, her questions more specific and technically informed. By the end of the week, a routine had established itself. Olivia would arrive at the garage each afternoon, spend 2 hours learning various aspects of auto maintenance, then leave for home or some scheduled activity. She revealed little about her personal life, deflecting questions about her family with vague responses. But Frank didn't press. He had been a private person himself, as a teenager, and he respected her boundaries. What did become clear, however, was that Olivia found a kind of peace in the garage that seemed missing from the rest of her life. The tense sense of her shoulders would gradually relax as she worked, and occasionally she would make dry, witty observations that hinted at an intelligence that went beyond academic achievement. "Why did you become a mechanic?" she asked one Friday afternoon as they worked together on a brake pad replacement, her voice casual but her eyes keenly interested. Frank paused, considering the question. No one had asked him that in years, perhaps. Not since his ex-wife had left. Claiming his devotion to the struggling garage was evidence of misplaced priorities. Necessity, at first, he admitted, checking the rotor for scoring. "My dad walked out when I was 14, left my mom with 3 kids and not much income. Our car was always breaking down, and we couldn't afford repairs. So I started learning from library books, trial and error. Found out I had a knack for it." Olivia nodded, absorbing this information with the same focus she gave to mechanical instructions. "But you stayed with it, even when you could have done something else." "Yeah, I did," Frank agreed, handing her a wrench. "Because I realized something important. I like fixing things. I like taking something broken and making it work again. There's a satisfaction in that you don't get from a lot of other jobs. Immediate results, you know? Car comes in broken, leaves running. Simple as that." "That makes sense," Olivia said quietly. "Creating order from chaos." The phrase struck Frank as unusually philosophical for a teenager, but it captured something essential about his relationship with his work. "Exactly. Plus, I get to be my own boss, make my own decisions. That's worth something, even when business is tough." Olivia looked around the garage, taking in the ward equipment, the patches on the roof, the outdated computer system at the front desk. "Is business tough right now?" Frank hesitated, not wanting to burden her with adult concerns, but also not wanting to be dishonest. "It's been better. That quick lube franchise opening up on Main didn't help. People like the convenience, the fast service, even if the quality isn't the same." "That's not fair," Olivia frowned. "Your work is better. I've watched you. You're careful, thorough." "Life isn't always fair, kid," Frank said, though he was touched by her indignation on his behalf. "But we keep going anyway." That's the other thing about being a mechanic, or any kind of repair person. You learn to work with what you've got, find solutions, even when conditions aren't perfect. Olivia's expression grew thoughtful. "I like that philosophy." The following week, Olivia's daily visits continued, and Frank found himself looking forward to the routine. His small garage, which had felt increasingly lonely as business declined, now had a regular pulse of energy and curiosity each afternoon. He began planning tasks, specifically with her education in mind, selecting repairs that would teach her different systems and skills. On Wednesday, as they worked on diagnosing an electrical issue in a Subaru, Frank realized that Olivia hadn't mentioned much about school recently. When she had first started visiting, she would occasionally reference upcoming AA tests or projects, but those mentions had tapered off. "How are things at Westridge?" he asked casually, testing a fuse with his multimeter. "You've been spending a lot of time here lately. Hope it's not interfering with your schoolwork." Olivia's hands stilled on the wiring harness she was examining. "School's fine," she said, her tone neutral but somehow flat. "My grades are good." "I'm sure they are," Frank nodded. "You're clearly smart. Just making sure you're balancing everything okay." There was a pause, during which Olivia seemed to be considering whether to say more. Finally she sighed. "The academic part of school is fine. It's the rest of it that's—" She trailed off, searching for words. "Complicated?" Frank suggested. "Yeah, complicated." Olivia reconnected the wiring harness with careful precision. "Everyone at Westridge has their thing, you know? Jenna plays violin with the youth symphony. Alex is captain of the debate team. Madison has her own fashion blog with thousands of followers. Everyone's exceptional at something. And you don't feel like you have your thing? Frank asked, beginning to understand. Olivia's shoulders tensed slightly. I get good grades. I participate in the required extracurriculars. But nothing ever really clicked. Nothing felt like it was truly mine. Until you started learning about cars. Frank finished for her. Yes, Olivia admitted, a hint of defiance in her voice. But it's not exactly something I can put on my college applications. Can change oil and replace brake pads. Not quite the same as founded a nonprofit or published research paper. Frank considered this, recognizing the immense pressure these privileged teenagers faced, the constant drive to distinguish themselves in increasingly competitive academic environments. Maybe not, he acknowledged. But there's value in practical skills, in knowing how to solve real-world problems. Not everything worthwhile fits into a college application box. Olivia nodded, but Frank could see she wasn't entirely convinced. He wondered if her parents shared the same achievement-oriented mindset that seemed prevalent at Westridge. If they would see value in the skills their daughter was acquiring in his humble garage. The following Monday, Olivia arrived at the garage with a determined expression and an unusual request. I want to try something on my own today, she announced. If that's okay. Frank looked up from the invoice he was completing. What did you have in mind? Mrs. Chen's Corolla, Olivia said, gesturing to the vehicle that had been brought in that morning for routine maintenance. I think I can handle the oil change and filter replacement by myself. You can supervise, but I want to do the actual work. Frank raised his eyebrows, impressed by her confidence. That's a paying customer's car, you know. Real responsibility. I know, Olivia nodded. But I've watched you do it multiple times now, and I did most of the work on Mr. Patel's Honda last week. I'm ready. Looking at her determined expression, Frank made a decision. All right, Mrs. Chen's car is yours. I'll be right here if you need help, but I won't step in unless you ask, or unless I see something going wrong. Deal? Deal, Olivia agreed, already reaching for the shop coveralls she had begun keeping on a hook near the back office. For the next hour, Frank observed as Olivia methodically performed every step of the maintenance service, from checking fluids to replacing the oil filter. From properly disposing of the used oil to updating the service sticker on the windshield. Her movements were careful, but increasingly confident, her focus unwavering. When she encountered minor difficulties, she worked through them with patience and ingenuity rather than immediately asking for help. When the job was complete, Frank inspected her work thoroughly, checking every connection and fluid level. Perfect, he declared finally. Couldn't have done it better myself. The pride that bloomed on Olivia's face was unmistakable, a transformation that made her seem suddenly younger and more vulnerable. For a moment, the serious, reserved teenager gave way to a child experiencing the pure joy of accomplishment, of creating something through her own efforts and abilities. Really? She asked, unable to contain her smile. Really, Frank confirmed. You've got a natural talent, Olivia. And you've been paying attention. That's a powerful combination. The next day, Frank had Olivia tackle a slightly more complex task, replacing the serpentine belt on a Nissan Altima. The day after that, she changed the cabin air filter and headlight bulbs on a Ford Focus. Each success built her confidence, and Frank found himself increasingly impressed by her mechanical intuition and growing skill set. By the end of the second week, customers had begun to notice Olivia's presence in the garage. Most were curious rather than concerned, and Frank assured them that he supervised all work closely. To his surprise, several regular customers expressed approval of his mentoring efforts. About time someone taught these kids some practical skills, Mrs. Guzman commented after watching Olivia check her tire pressure. My grandson can program a computer but can't change a light bulb. What happens when the power goes out? Kid, Google how to fix things if your phone's dead. Mr. Patel from the pharmacy was equally supportive. I've been coming to you for years because I trust your work, Frank. If you trust her to work on my car, that's good enough for me. This community endorsement seemed to mean as much to Olivia as Frank's own approval. She began interacting more with the customers, explaining the work she had done, offering maintenance tips with a quiet confidence that grew with each positive response. On Friday afternoon, as they were cleaning up the garage, Olivia asked a question that caught Frank by surprise. "Do you think I could come in tomorrow?" "Saturday, I mean. I know it's not a school day, but—" Frank paused in the act of returning tools to their proper places. Saturdays were his busiest days, with customers who couldn't bring their vehicles in during the work week. He usually handled the rush alone, often working through lunch to stay on schedule. "I could really use the help, actually," he admitted. "If you're serious about it. It gets pretty hectic around here on Saturdays." "I'm serious," Olivia assured him. "I don't have anything else planned, and I like being here." The simple admission touched Frank more than he expected. "Then you're hired," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "Not officially, of course, but I'll make it worth your while. Maybe teach you something about the business side of things, too, if you're interested." "I am," Olivia nodded, her expression brightening. "What time should I be here?" "I open at 8. Come whenever you can. Stay as long as you want." That Saturday marked a shift in their arrangement. Olivia arrived promptly at 8, dressed in practical clothes and ready to work. The garage was indeed busy, with a steady stream of oil changes, tire rotations, and minor repairs, keeping them occupied throughout the morning. Frank was impressed by Olivia's stamina and focus. Her willingness to tackle less glamorous tasks, like inventory organization and parts cleaning, with the same dedication she showed for more interesting repairs. During a brief lull around noon, Frank insisted they take a proper lunch break. He walked to the bodega on the corner and returned with sandwiches and cold drinks, which they ate sitting on plastic chairs in front of the garage, watching the neighborhood weekend activity unfold around them. "So," Frank said, between bites of his turkey sandwich, "you never mentioned what your parents think about you spending so much time here." Olivia's expression shuddered slightly. Her sandwich paused halfway to her mouth. "They don't really know the details," she admitted after a moment. "They think I'm doing a community service project for school, learning about small businesses in economically diverse neighborhoods, or something like that." Frank raised his eyebrows. "That's pretty specific, and not entirely true." "Not entirely false either," Olivia countered, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "I am learning about a small business, and I am doing service, helping you with the garage." "Fair enough," Frank conceded, recognizing the complex navigation of truth and expectations that often characterized adolescence. "But they're okay with you being here? In this neighborhood?" Olivia's gaze dropped to her half-eaten sandwich. "My dad's really busy with work. As long as my grades stay up and I'm where I'm supposed to be for official events, he doesn't ask too many questions. And my mom?" She hesitated, a flicker of something like pain crossing her features. "My mom died 3 years ago. Cancer." The revelation hung in the air between them, a sudden glimpse into Olivia's closely guarded personal life. Frank felt a surge of sympathy, understanding now some of the seriousness that seemed to surround the girl like a burl, protective shell. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That's rough. I lost my mom last year. Different when you're an adult, of course, but still leaves a hole nothing quite fills." Olivia nodded, recognizing the shared experience. "Yeah, everyone expects you to move on after a while, but it doesn't really work that way." "No, it doesn't," Frank agreed. "My mom was the one who believed in me starting this garage, you know. Everyone else thought it was too risky, that I should stay with my city job, with the benefits and a pension. But she understood why I needed to try." "She sounds wise," Olivia said softly. "She was. Practical too, like your interest in cars. She'd have liked you, I think." They finished their lunch in companionable silence, the shared confidences creating a deeper understanding between them. When they returned to work, the dynamic had subtly shifted. A mutual respect that went beyond the mentor-student relationship they had initially established. The Saturday workday stretched into late afternoon, with Olivia staying until the last customer had been served and the garage properly closed up. As Frank counted the day's earnings, better than any Saturday in recent memory thanks to Olivia's help with efficiency, he made a brass decision. "Here," he said, holding out several $20 bills. "For your help today. Couldn't have handled the rush without you." Olivia looked startled, her hands remaining at her sides. "I wasn't expecting to be paid. I'm learning from you. That's compensation enough." "Maybe," Frank acknowledged, "but you did real work today. Helped me serve more customers than I could have alone. That deserves recognition." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia accepted the money, tucking it carefully into her pocket. "Thank you. Not just for this, but for teaching me. For taking me seriously." "You're easy to take seriously," Frank told her. "You show up, you pay attention, you do the work. That's more than a lot of adults manage." The following week established a new pattern. Olivia continued her daily after-school visits, but now she came on Saturdays as well, working alongside Frank for the full day and receiving modest payment for her assistance. Frank began teaching her more advanced skills, from diagnostic procedures to understanding the complex computer systems in newer vehicles. What surprised him most was how quickly word spread about the garage's teenage apprentice. Customers began specifically requesting Olivia for certain services. Impressed by her thoroughness and attention to detail, several mentioned that they had referred friends and family to Rodriguez Auto Repair specifically because they appreciated the mentorship Frank was providing. For the first time in months, business was steady, even occasionally brisk. Frank found himself ordering parts more frequently, considering equipment upgrades that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The garage still wasn't prosperous, by any standard, but the immediate threat of closure had receded, replaced by cautious optimism about the future. More significant than the financial improvement, however, was the change in Frank himself. The garage no longer felt like a burden, a failing business draining his resources and energy. Instead, it had become a place of purpose again, a setting where knowledge was exchanged, where a teenager was discovering capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Frank found himself planning improvements to the space, considering how he might make it more conducive to learning as well as repairs. Olivia, too, was changing. The reserved, serious girl who had first watched the garage from across the street had gradually given way to a more confident young woman who could explain complex mechanical processes with clarity and precision. She still maintained a certain privacy about her personal life, but her increasing comfort in the garage environment was evident in her more relaxed posture, her occasional jokes, her willingness to interact with customers. On a Wednesday afternoon in early October, about a month after Olivia had first appeared at the garage, she arrived with unusual excitement, practically bouncing as she entered the workspace. "I got an A+ on my physics project," she announced without preamble. "And my teacher said it was one of the most practical applications she'd seen in years." Frank looked up from the carburetor he was rebuilding, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's great, Olivia. What was the project about?" "Mechanical advantage and efficiency in automotive systems," Olivia explained, setting down her backpack and immediately reaching for her work clothes. "I used what you taught me about how different components work together, explained the physics behind why certain designs function better than others. I even included some of the diagnostic methods you showed me for identifying system inefficiencies." "Sounds impressive," Frank said, meaning it. "Your teacher must have been surprised. Not the usual physics project, I'm guessing." "Definitely not," Olivia agreed with a small laugh. "Most of my classmates did things with simple machines or roller coasters. My presentation had actual car parts." "Well, I'm proud of you," Frank told her, the words coming easily despite their relative newness in his vocabulary. "Always good to see practical knowledge valued in an academic setting." The compliment brought a flush of pleasure to Olivia's cheeks. "Thanks. It felt good to share what I've learned here." Some of my classmates even seemed interested, asked me questions about basic car maintenance. "Maybe you should start your own workshops," Frank suggested, half joking. "Teach those Westridge kids how to change a tire instead of calling roadside assistance every time they get a flat." To his surprise, Olivia took the suggestion seriously. "That's not a bad idea, actually. There's this community service requirement for seniors, and most people just volunteer at the hospital or tutor elementary school kids. A basic car maintenance workshop would be different. Frank could see her mind working, the possibilities unfolding. "You'd be good at it," he said. "You explain things clearly, break them down into understandable steps. That's not as common a skill as you might think." "Do you really think people would be interested?" Olivia asked, a hint of uncertainty beneath her enthusiasm. "Absolutely," Frank assured her. "Everyone should know basic maintenance, but most people never learn. Schools don't teach it anymore, and a lot of parents don't know enough to pass it on. There's a real gap there, a need that isn't being met." The conversation continued as they worked, with Olivia developing the concept further and Frank offering practical suggestions about structure and content. By the end of the afternoon, she had outlined a 6-session workshop covering essential maintenance skills, from checking fluid levels to changing tires, replacing bulbs to understanding warning lights. "I'm going to propose it to the community service coordinator tomorrow," Olivia decided as they cleaned up for the day. "See what she thinks." "Let me know how it goes," Frank said, finding himself genuinely invested in the outcome. "And if you need any materials or demonstrations for your presentation, just say the word." The following day, Olivia arrived at the garage practically vibrating with excitement. "She approved it," she announced as soon as she entered. "The community service coordinator." She said it was one of the most practical proposals she'd received in years. "We're going to schedule the workshops for next month, and they'll count toward my service hours requirement." "That's fantastic, Olivia," Frank said, genuinely pleased for her. "Congratulations." "There's more," Olivia continued, her words tumbling out in an uncharacteristic rush. "She wants me to present the workshop idea at the school assembly next week as an example of innovative community service. And she suggested that I might want to invite my mentor to attend." The last words were delivered with a hint of uncertainty, as if Olivia wasn't sure how Frank would respond to the invitation. "Your mentor?" he repeated, setting down the wrench he had been using. "You," Olivia clarified. "I told her I'd been learning from an experienced mechanic, that you'd been teaching me everything I know about cars. She said it would add credibility to have you there, show that I've been receiving proper instruction." Frank was touched by the invitation, but also hesitant. Westridge Academy was a world away from his garage, an environment where he suspected his worn work clothes and calloused hands would be distinctly out of place. "That's nice of her to suggest," he said carefully. "But I'm not sure if—" "Please consider it," Olivia interrupted, her expression earnest. "It would mean a lot to me, and I think it would be good for the other students to see that expertise doesn't just come from universities or corporate settings, that there are different kinds of knowledge, different paths to mastery." Put that way, Frank found it difficult to refuse. "What is this assembly?" he asked, already mentally reviewing his appointment schedule for the following week. "Next Thursday at 2 o'clock, Olivia replied, relief evident in her voice. "You won't need to speak or anything, just be there in the audience. I'll mention you in my presentation, explain how you've been teaching me." "Thursday at 2, Frank repeated, nodding slowly. "I can make that work. Mrs. Guzman's brake job can wait until the afternoon. But, Olivia," he added, gesturing to his grease-stained coveralls, "I'm not exactly dressed for Westridge Academy most days." A small smile played at the corners of Olivia's mouth. "You don't have to wear your work clothes, but you don't need to dress up either. Just come as yourself, Frank. That's the whole point." Over the next week, Olivia spent her afternoons at the garage as usual, but her focus was divided between automotive tasks and preparation for her assembly presentation. Frank noticed her occasionally practicing sections of her speech while working, rehearsing explanations of basic maintenance procedures as she performed them. Her dedication impressed him, as did her growing ability to translate complex mechanical concepts into clear, accessible language. On Wednesday afternoon, the day before the assembly, Olivia seemed unusually quiet, her movements less fluid than normal, her concentration frequently broken by moments of apparent anxiety. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Frank asked, as they worked side by side on a transmission fluid change, his tone casual but concerned. Olivia nodded, her eyes fixed on the drain pan. "A little. I've never spoken in front of the whole school before. 300 students plus faculty, all staring at me. That would make anyone nervous, Frank acknowledged. But remember, you're talking about something you know well now. You've put in the time, done the work. That confidence comes through when you speak. I hope so, Olivia said, her voice small. I just don't want to mess up, especially with you there. Frank straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Listen, Olivia. Public speaking is like changing a timing belt. Looks complicated from the outside. But when you break it down into steps, focus on one connection at a time, it's manageable. Just talk to them the way you explain things to me or to customers. Clear, straightforward, no jargon unless necessary. And if I freeze up? Olivia asked, the concern evident in her eyes. Then you take a breath. Just like when a bolt's stuck or a part won't fit right. Pause, reset, try again. Nobody gets it perfect the first time. The important thing is that you're sharing something valuable, something most of those kids have never thought about before. End quote. Olivia considered this, her shoulders relaxing slightly. That helps. Thanks, Frank. Besides, he added with a small smile, you've been elbow-deep in engine oil and transmission fluid for weeks now. Standing on a stage in a clean uniform talking about it should be the easy part. This drew a genuine laugh from Olivia, the tension visibly leaving her body. When you put it that way, it does seem less intimidating. The next day, Frank closed the garage at 1 o'clock, earlier than he had in years. He showered in the small bathroom at the back of the shop, washing away the morning's accumulated grime, and changed into the clothes he had brought specifically for the occasion. Clean dark jeans, a button-up shirt that his ex-wife had given him years ago, and his least scuffed pair of boots. He even trimmed his beard, which had grown somewhat wild in recent months, as personal grooming took a back seat to business concerns. Looking in the small, spotted mirror above the bathroom sink, Frank barely recognized himself. The man staring back at him seemed older and younger simultaneously, the gray at his temples more pronounced against the crisp blue of his shirt. The lines around his eyes softened without the perpetual smudge of grease that usually marked his face. Westridge Academy was located in the northeastern part of Millfield, set back from the main road behind an imposing brick wall and ornate iron gates. As Frank parked his aging pickup truck in the visitor's lot, he couldn't help but notice the contrast between his vehicle and the luxury SUVs and sedans that surrounded it. For a moment, he considered leaving, driving back to the familiar confines of his garage. But the thought of disappointing Olivia was enough to propel him forward, through the gates, and toward the main building. The campus itself was as impressive as its reputation suggested. Manicured lawns surrounded neo-Gothic buildings of gray stone, their windows tall and arched, their entrances flanked by classical columns. Students in navy blazers and plaid skirts or gray trousers moved between classes, their conversations dropping to curious whispers as Frank passed. Following signs for the auditorium, Frank found himself in a grand hall with tiered seating and a proper stage, more elaborate than many community theaters. The space was already filling with students and faculty, a sea of uniforms and attentive faces. A woman in a tailored suit approached him as he hesitated in the doorway. "May I help you?" she asked, her tone professionally polite, but with an undercurrent of assessment. "I'm here for the assembly," Frank explained. "Olivia's presentation on automotive maintenance? I'm Frank Rodriguez, her mentor, I guess you'd say." The woman's expression shifted from polite inquiry to genuine interest. "Mr. Rodriguez, of course. Olivia has told us about your work with her. I'm Dr. Marshall, the Community Service Coordinator. We're so pleased you could join us today." Olivia's workshop proposal has generated quite a bit of excitement among the faculty. Surprised by the warm reception, Frank followed Dr. Marshall to a reserved seat near the front of the auditorium. As they made their way down the aisle, he noticed a man in an expensive suit observing them with particular interest from a seat in the first row. "That's Robert Chen, Olivia's father," Dr. Marshall explained in a low voice, following Frank's gaze. "He rarely attends school functions due to his schedule, but he made a point of being here today. I think he's quite curious about his daughter's new interest." The information caused a flutter of anxiety in Frank's stomach. He had known, of course, that Olivia must come from a wealthy family to attend Westridge, but the reality of her father's presence made the class divide suddenly more tangible. Before he could respond, the assembly began, with the school principal making opening announcements and introducing the community service showcase. Several students presented their service projects before Olivia's turn arrived. Frank listened with half an ear to descriptions of hospital volunteering, environmental cleanup efforts, and tutoring programs. His attention focused on the side of the stage where he could see Olivia waiting, her uniform perfectly pressed, her posture rigidly straight. When her name was called, she walked to the center of the stage with careful deliberation, her steps measured, her expression composed. For a moment, she stood silently, scanning the audience, and Frank could sense the nervousness radiating from her despite her outward calm. Then her gaze found him, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. Something in her posture shifted, a subtle relaxation, and she began to speak. "Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Chen, and I'm here to present a different kind of community service project. Over the past month, I've been learning automotive maintenance and repair at Rodriguez Auto Repair, a local garage in East Millfield." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience, students turning to one another with raised eyebrows and whispered comments. Frank noticed Robert Chen sit up straighter, his attention focused entirely on his daughter. "This project began with a simple question," Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger. "Why don't more people know how to maintain their own vehicles?" The answer, I discovered, isn't lack of interest or ability. It's lack of access to knowledge and instruction. Under the guidance of master mechanic Frank Rodriguez, I've learned that automotive maintenance isn't just about keeping a car running. It's about understanding systems, solving problems, and developing self-reliance." End quote. As Olivia continued her presentation, explaining the workshop series she planned to offer and the skills participants would learn, Frank felt a strange mixture of pride and amazement. The shy teenager who had watched his garage from across the street had transformed into a confident young woman articulating a vision of practical education that resonated with even this privileged audience. When she demonstrated a simulated oil change using props she had brought, complete with clear explanations of each step and its purpose, the students leaned forward, genuinely engaged. "In our increasingly digital world," Olivia concluded, "we're losing touch with the physical systems that surround us. We don't know how things work, how to fix them when they break, how to maintain them to prevent problems. My workshops aim to address one small part of that knowledge gap, to reconnect participants with the practical skills that previous generations took for granted. As Mr. Braun Rodriguez taught me, there's a special satisfaction in solving a tangible problem with your own hands. That's a feeling I want to share with my peers." The applause that followed her presentation was enthusiastic and genuine. As Olivia left the stage, her eyes sought Frank's, and the smile they shared communicated more than words could express, a mutual recognition of something valuable created between them. After the assembly concluded, students and faculty gathered in the school lobby for refreshments. Frank stood awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, uncertain of his place in this environment, until Olivia appeared at his side, her face flushed with success. "You were amazing," he told her immediately. "Clear, confident, engaging. Couldn't have done better myself." "Thanks to your coaching," Olivia replied, her eyes bright. "And for coming today. It made all the difference knowing you were in the audience." Before Frank could respond, they were approached by Robert Chen, whose expression was difficult to read. Up close, he was an imposing figure, tall and lean, with Olivia's serious dark eyes and a bearing that spoke of authority and influence. "Dad," Olivia said, her voice containing a hint of nervousness that hadn't been present during her presentation. "This is Frank Rodriguez, the mechanic I told you about. Frank, this is my father, Robert Chen." "Mr. Rodriguez," Chen extended his hand, his grip firm and assessing. "I've heard quite a bit about you in the last half hour. More than I've heard in the previous month, apparently." The last comment was directed at Olivia, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I was going to tell you about the garage," she said. Once I knew the workshop proposal was approved, Chen's expression softened slightly. Your presentation was impressive, Olivia. Very professional. Dr. Marshall tells me you've been spending considerable time at Mr. Rodriguez's garage, learning these skills. Yes, Olivia confirmed, her posture straightening. Almost every day after school. And Saturdays. Frank has been teaching me everything about basic maintenance and repairs. Chen turned his attention back to Frank, his gaze evaluative. That's quite a commitment, Mr. Rodriguez, taking time from your business to teach a teenager. Olivia's a quick study, Frank replied honestly. And she's been helping around the garage, becoming a real asset. It's been a mutually beneficial arrangement. I see, Chen nodded slowly. Well, I appreciate the skills you've taught my daughter. They're certainly not part of the standard Westridge curriculum. But I must admit, I'm curious why you've taken such an interest in mentoring her. The question contained a hint of suspicion that Frank had been half expecting. A middle-aged mechanic, spending time with a teenage girl from a wealthy family. There was plenty of room for misinterpretation there. Dad? Olivia began, her tone defensive, but Frank gently interrupted. It's a fair question, he said. The truth is, your daughter showed genuine interest in learning something I've spent my life doing. That doesn't happen often these days. Most young people see manual trades as obsolete, or beneath them. Olivia approached with respect and determination. Any good craftsman values the opportunity to pass on their knowledge to someone who truly wants to learn. End quote. Chen studied Frank's face for a long moment, seemingly searching for ulterior motives. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because his expression relaxed into something more open. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Rodriguez. And your expertise. Olivia's mother was always the practical one in our family, the one who could fix things around the house. When we lost her, we lost that skill set as well. I've relied on service calls for everything from leaky faucets to malfunctioning appliances. Perhaps it's fitting that Olivia is reclaiming some of that practical capability. The mention of Olivia's mother created a moment of shared understanding between the three of them, a recognition of absence that had shaped their lives in different ways. Mom would have loved a garage, Olivia said softly. She always said people should know how the things they depend on actually work. She would have, Chen agreed, his expression momentarily distant. Then, focusing again on Frank, he asked, Would you join us for dinner this evening, Mr. Rodriguez? I'd like to hear more about this workshop series Olivia is planning, and about the skills she's been learning with you. The invitation caught Frank by surprise. I wouldn't want to impose, he began, but Chen waved away the objection. Not an imposition at all. In fact, I insist. It's the least I can do to thank you for the time you've invested in my daughter's education. Glancing at Olivia's hopeful expression, Frank found himself nodding. In that case, I'd be honored. Thank you. As Chen excused himself to speak with the principal, Olivia turned to Frank with barely contained excitement. This is great! Dad never invites people to dinner. He must really be impressed with the workshop idea. Or he wants to interrogate me more thoroughly in a private setting, Frank suggested wryly. Olivia laughed. Maybe a little of both. But seriously, this is a good sign. He's taking an interest, engaging with what I'm doing instead of just checking that my grades are acceptable. Frank recognized the significance of this shift from Olivia's perspective. For all the material advantages her father's wealth provided, there was a loneliness in her previous descriptions of their relationship, a distance maintained by busy schedules and different priorities. I'm glad, he told her sincerely. It's important for parents to see their kids' passions, even when they're unexpected. That evening, Frank found himself driving his pickup truck through the winding roads of Hillcrest, Millfield's most exclusive residential neighborhood. Following the directions Olivia had provided, he arrived at a modern mansion of glass and stone, its expansive grounds surrounded by a tasteful security fence. The contrast between this estate and his small apartment above the garage couldn't have been more stark, yet Frank approached the imposing entrance with the quiet confidence of someone secure in their own worth, regardless of financial circumstances. Dinner at the Chen residence was both more and less formal than Frank had anticipated. The dining room was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a landscaped garden, but the meal itself was casual, Thai takeout from what Robert Chen described as Olivia's favorite restaurant. The conversation flowed more easily than Frank had expected, with Chen asking detailed questions about automotive systems and maintenance procedures that revealed genuine curiosity beneath the initial skepticism. "So, this workshop series Olivia is planning," Chen said as they finished their meal. "It would teach basic maintenance skills to other Westridge students?" "That's the idea," Olivia confirmed. 5 sessions covering the essentials, from checking fluid levels to changing tires. Nothing too complex, but enough that they wouldn't be helpless if their car had a simple problem. "And where would these workshops be held?" Chen asked, glancing between his daughter and Frank. Olivia hesitated. "We haven't finalized that yet. I was thinking maybe the school parking lot for demonstrations, but for actual hands-on practice, we'd need access to real vehicles and tools. My garage would be the logical location," Frank suggested, "but I understand if that's not practical given the distance from Westridge and potential liability concerns." Chen considered this, his expression thoughtful. "The location is an issue, but not insurmountable. Transportation could be arranged. As for liability, that's a matter of proper insurance and waivers, which can be managed." The conversation continued in this practical vein, with Chen revealing a businessman's approach to problem-solving, identifying obstacles, and methodically addressing them. By the end of the evening, a tentative plan had emerged. Olivia would conduct theoretical sessions and simple demonstrations at Westridge, followed by practical workshops at Rodriguez Auto Repair for students who obtained parental permission and signed appropriate waivers. As Frank prepared to leave, Chen walked him to the door, holding back slightly to speak privately while Olivia collected some materials she wanted to show Frank for the workshops. "Mr. Rodriguez," Chen began, his tone more serious than it had been during dinner. "I need to be direct with you. When Olivia first mentioned a mechanic who was teaching her about cars, I had concerns. A teenager spending significant time with an adult outside of school oversight, it raises natural questions for a parent." Frank nodded, understanding the implied concern. "I would have had the same questions in your position, Mr. Chen. But having met you, having seen Olivia's enthusiasm for what she's learning, and most importantly, seeing the confidence she's developed through this experience, my perspective has changed," Chen continued. "My daughter has always been academically gifted but socially reserved. Since her mother died, that tendency toward isolation has intensified. This is the first time in years I've seen her truly passionate about something, willing to step outside her comfort zone, to speak publicly about her interests." "Olivia has natural talent," Frank said honestly, "both for the mechanical work itself and for explaining it to others. She just needed the opportunity to discover that." Chen nodded slowly. "Opportunity and encouragement, which you provided when I was too absorbed in my own work to notice what she needed." There was a hint of self-recrimination in his tone. "I've tried to give Olivia every advantage, ensure her future success through the best education, the right connections. But I've perhaps neglected the more fundamental aspects of parenting, the encouragement of her unique interests and abilities." Before Frank could formulate a response to this unexpectedly personal admission, Olivia returned with a folder of workshop materials, and the conversation necessarily shifted. As they said their goodbyes, however, Chen shook Frank's hand with genuine warmth. "You're welcome in our home any time, Mr. Rodriguez, and I look forward to seeing these workshops in action." Driving back to his garage that night, Frank reflected on the strange turns his life had taken in the past month. From struggling business owner contemplating closure, to mentor, teacher, and now dinner guest in one of Millfield's most exclusive homes. None of it made logical sense, yet all of it had unfolded from one simple act: inviting a curious teenager to learn something new. The following Monday, Olivia arrived at the garage with a surprising announcement. "The first workshop session is already full," she reported excitedly. 20 students signed up as soon as the announcement went out. Dr. Marshall said we might need to add a second series if interest continues at this level." 20 students? Frank repeated, genuinely surprised. "All wanting to learn basic car maintenance?" Apparently, Olivia grinned. I think my presentation made an impression. Plus, there's this new environmental awareness club at school that's been talking about the importance of maintaining vehicles properly to reduce emissions and extend their lifespan. They're promoting the workshops as a sustainability initiative. Well, good for them, Frank said, pleasantly surprised by this unexpected alignment of interests. And good for you. Looks like you've tapped into something people really want to learn. Over the next 2 weeks, preparations for the workshop series consumed much of their afternoon time. Frank helped Olivia develop clear instructional materials, select appropriate demonstration vehicles, and plan the progression of skills to be taught. They converted a corner of the garage into a small classroom area, with folding chairs borrowed from the community center and a whiteboard donated by a local office supply store that had heard about the initiative. Word of the workshops spread beyond Westridge Academy, generating interest from other schools and community organizations. The local newspaper ran a small feature on the program, highlighting the cross-generational knowledge transfer and the revival of practical skills education. Frank found himself fielding calls from parents and educators curious about the initiative, some expressing interest in developing similar programs in other settings. The first workshop session was scheduled for a Saturday in late October. Frank arrived at the garage early that morning, wanting to ensure everything was perfectly prepared for the students' arrival. He had spent the previous evening cleaning the workspace more thoroughly than usual, organizing tools for easy access, and preparing the demonstration vehicles, 2 older models he had specifically purchased for educational purposes. As he made these final preparations, a sleek black town car pulled up outside the garage. Frank recognized it immediately as the vehicle that had driven Olivia home after several recent afternoon sessions. The rear door opened, and Robert Chen emerged, dressed more casually than Frank had seen him before, in slacks and a button-down shirt without a tie. "Mr. Rodriguez," Chen greeted him, approaching with an outstretched hand. "I hope you don't mind my early arrival. Olivia is coming separately with the student group, but I wanted to speak with you privately before they get here." Frank shook the offered hand, curious about the purpose of this unexpected visit. "Of course. Come in. Can I offer you some coffee?" "Nothing fancy, I'm afraid. Just the regular shop brew." "Coffee would be perfect, thank you." Chen accepted, following Frank into the small office area at the front of the garage. As Frank poured 2 mugs from the ancient coffee maker that had served the garage for at least a decade, Chen surveyed the workspace with careful attention, his gaze lingering on the newly arranged classroom area and the meticulously organized tool stations. "You've put considerable effort into preparing for these workshops," he observed, accepting the mug Frank offered. "Olivia's done most of the planning," Frank replied truthfully. "I've just provided the space and some guidance on the technical aspects." Chen nodded, taking a sip of the strong black coffee without any sign of displeasure at its working-class quality. "Nevertheless, you've gone above and beyond what might be expected for a school project. Opening your business, sharing your expertise, purchasing vehicles specifically for training purposes. These are significant commitments." Frank wasn't sure how to respond to what seemed like neither a question nor a simple observation. "I believe in what Olivia's trying to do," he said finally. "Practical skills education matters, and she's got a real talent for teaching." "Yes, she does," Chen agreed, his expression softening slightly. "Her mother was the same way, could explain complex concepts with remarkable clarity. It's a gift I've always lacked myself, tending to overwhelm listeners with details rather than distilling information to its essential components." He set his coffee mug down on Frank's cluttered desk, his manner shifting to something more formal, more reminiscent of their first meeting. "Mr. Rodriguez, I came here today with a specific purpose. After observing the positive impact your mentorship has had on Olivia, and after considerable research into the declining state of practical skills education in our school systems, I've developed a proposal I'd like to discuss with you." Frank raised his eyebrows, intrigued despite his natural wariness of formal proposals from wealthy businessmen. "What kind of proposal?" "A partnership, of sorts," Chen replied. "As you may or may not know, in addition to my other business interests, I serve as the mayor of Millfield. The revelation hit Frank like a physical blow, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his mug as his hand jerked in surprise. The mayor of Newfield? He had known Chen was wealthy and influential, but this placed him in an entirely different category of power and connection. Suddenly, Olivia's reluctance to share details about her family made perfect sense, as did her careful navigation of truth and expectations regarding her time at the garage. "I had no idea," Frank admitted, mentally reviewing all his interactions with Olivia, searching for any hint she might have dropped about her father's position. "Olivia never mentioned that." A ghost of a smile crossed Chen's face. "My daughter values her privacy, and she's learned to be cautious about revealing her connection to my office. People tend to treat her differently when they know, either with excessive deference or with resentment, depending on their political leanings. Neither response allows for genuine relationships." Frank nodded, understanding this concern all too well. "That makes sense. But I'm not sure I understand what kind of partnership you're proposing, Mayor Chen." "Robert, please," Chen insisted, "at least in private settings. And my proposal is this. The city of Millfield has recently received a significant federal grant for youth development initiatives, with a specific focus on workforce preparation and practical skills training. I believe your garage, with some modifications and expansions, could serve as an ideal location for a youth automotive skills center, offering programs like Olivia's workshops on a larger scale, perhaps even developing into apprenticeship opportunities for students interested in pursuing careers in automotive technology." Frank stared at him, momentarily speechless. Of all the possible reasons for the mayor's early morning visit, this proposal had never crossed his mind. "You want to turn my garage into some kind of training center?" he finally managed. "Not exactly," Chen clarified. "Your garage would remain your business, operating as it always has. But with grant funding, we could expand the facility, add dedicated training spaces, purchase additional equipment and training vehicles, hire additional instructional staff to assist you. You would serve as lead instructor and program director, compensated for your time and expertise above and beyond your regular business income." The proposal was so unexpected, so far removed from the struggling reality Frank had faced just weeks earlier, that he found it difficult to process. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why not one of the larger operations in town, or the community college's autotech program?" Chen's expression grew more serious. "Because you've already demonstrated the qualities essential for this initiative's success: patience, genuine commitment to teaching, ability to connect with young people from diverse backgrounds. Olivia has told me how you interact with neighborhood children who visit the garage, answering their questions, showing them basic components, treating their curiosity with respect. That natural instructional ability can't be manufactured or incentivized. It's either there or it isn't." End quote. Frank absorbed this, surprised by Olivia's observations and Chen's assessment of his teaching abilities. He had never considered himself particularly gifted with young people, had simply treated them with the same respect he would show anyone genuinely interested in learning. "This sounds like a significant undertaking," he said carefully. "I'd need to think about it, understand the details better." "Of course," Chen nodded. "I have the full proposal here, including budget projections, facility requirements, and program outlines." He reached into a slim briefcase Frank hadn't noticed him carrying and withdrew a folder. "Take your time reviewing it. Consult with legal or financial advisors if you wish. The grant funding is secure, and the City Council has already approved the basic concept. The specific implementation details remain flexible." "Ah." Before Frank could respond, the sound of vehicles arriving outside signaled the approach of the workshop participants. Chen glanced at his watch, then handed Frank the folder. "We can discuss this further after today's session. For now, let's focus on Olivia's workshop. I'm looking forward to seeing her in action as an instructor." The arrival of 20 eager students, accompanied by Dr. Marshall and 2 other Westridge faculty members, created a flurry of activity that postponed any further conversation about Chen's proposal. Frank found himself swept up in the logistics of the workshop, helping Olivia organize the students into small groups and establish safety protocols before the actual instruction began. Watching Olivia conduct the session was a revelation. The shy teenager who had first appeared at his garage had transformed into a confident instructor, explaining basic automotive systems with clarity and precision, answering questions with patience, demonstrating procedures with practiced skill. The students, initially skeptical or hesitant, gradually became engaged, their questions more specific, their participation more enthusiastic as the 3-hour workshop progressed. Throughout the session, Robert Chen observed quietly from the periphery, his expression thoughtful as he watched not only his daughter but the overall dynamics of the workshop, the students' reactions, the effectiveness of the hands-on learning approach. Occasionally, he made notes in a small notebook, but mostly he simply watched, absorbing the educational process unfolding in the humble surroundings of Rodriguez Auto Repair. When the workshop concluded and the students departed, full of newly acquired knowledge and visible pride in their accomplishments, Olivia approached her father and Frank with an expression of exhausted satisfaction. "That went even better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the bottle of water Frank offered. Everyone was so engaged, especially during the hands-on portions, and they want to know when the next session will be scheduled. "You were excellent," Frank told her sincerely. "Clear, patient, thorough, a natural teacher." "I agree," Chen added, his pride evident. "You have your mother's gift for explanation, making complex subjects accessible without oversimplification. The students responded remarkably well to your approach." Olivia flushed with pleasure at their praise. "It helped having such a well-prepared space," she said, gesturing around the garage. Frank thought of everything, from the demonstration vehicles to the safety equipment, to having parts pre-loosened so beginners could successfully remove and replace them. "Speaking of the space," Chen said, turning to Frank, "have you had a chance to consider my proposal at all?" "Proposal?" Olivia looked between them, curiosity evident in her expression. "What proposal?" Frank hesitated, not wanting to mention the youth center concept before he had fully processed it himself. But Chen answered directly. "I've proposed that your mentor's garage might serve as the location for a CITA-funded youth automotive skills center," he explained. "Building on the success of your workshop model, but expanding it to serve more students from across Millfield, particularly those who might be interested in careers in automotive technology." Olivia's eyes widened. "Dad, that's amazing. It's exactly what we've been talking about, creating more opportunities for practical skills education. Frank would be perfect for something like that." Her immediate enthusiasm was touching, but Frank maintained his cautious approach. "It's a big decision," he reminded her. "Would change a lot about how the garage operates, my daily responsibilities. But in a good way, right?" Olivia pressed. "You've said yourself that teaching has been the most rewarding part of the past month. And the garage has been busier too, with all the new customers who've heard about the workshops." This was true. Word of mouth had brought several new clients to the garage. People who appreciated Frank's teaching approach and wanted to support a business that contributed to the community. Still, transitioning from occasional mentorship to a formal educational role was a significant shift, one that warranted careful consideration. "I'm not saying no," Frank clarified, looking between father and daughter. "Just that I need time to think it through, understand what I'd be committing to." "Of course," Chen nodded. "Take all the time you need. The funding isn't going anywhere, and the program development would be a collaborative process, shaped by your input and expertise." As they cleaned up after the workshop, Frank found his thoughts returning repeatedly to the proposal. The idea of creating a space where young people could learn practical skills, develop confidence in their abilities, perhaps even discover vocational paths they hadn't previously considered, held undeniable appeal. He thought of Olivia's transformation over the past month, how the acquisition of mechanical knowledge had given her not just practical abilities, but a sense of capability that extended beyond the garage. Could that same transformation be facilitated for other young people? Teenagers from across Millfield's diverse neighborhoods, some with abundant resources like Olivia, others with few opportunities but equal potential? The possibility was compelling, addressing a need Frank had observed throughout his career. The declining transmission of practical knowledge from one generation to the next. That evening, after Olivia and her father had departed, Frank sat in his small apartment above the garage, reviewing the detailed proposal Chen had provided. The funding was substantial, enough to completely renovate the existing garage and add a significant educational facility to the property. The projected budget included fair compensation for Frank's instructional role, while preserving his independence as a business owner. Most importantly, the program objectives aligned perfectly with his own values: practical education, respect for skilled trades, development of self-reliance, and problem-solving abilities. As Frank considered the proposal, he found himself thinking of his mother, who had supported his dream of opening the garage when others had advised caution. She had understood his need to create something of his own, to build a space where work was done with integrity and skill. Would she see this youth center as a natural evolution of that dream, an expansion rather than a diversion? He believed she would. His mother had been a teacher before her marriage, had always valued education in all its forms. She would appreciate the symmetry of his garage becoming not just a place where vehicles were repaired, but where young minds were engaged, where practical wisdom was preserved and transmitted. The decision, when it finally crystallized, felt less like a leap into the unknown and more like a recognition of a path that had been gradually revealing itself. The struggling garage of recent months, the unexpected mentorship of a curious teenager, the surprising connection to the mayor's office, all converging toward a new purpose that honored the past while creating something new. Monday morning found Frank at his desk earlier than usual, reviewing client schedules and considering how the proposed renovation might be phased to minimize disruption to his existing business. He was so absorbed in these calculations that he didn't immediately notice the black town car pulling up outside, or the familiar figure that emerged from it. A knock at the office door drew his attention. Robert Chen stood in the doorway, dressed in his mayoral attire of tailored suit and subtle tie, his expression inquiring. "Do you have a moment, Frank? I was on my way to a council meeting and thought I might stop by briefly." "Of course," Frank gestured to the chair across from his desk, quickly clearing away some paperwork to make space. "Coffee?" "Thank you." "No." Chen declined, seating himself with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to formal meetings. "I simply wanted to check whether you had any initial thoughts or questions about the proposal. No pressure for a decision yet, of course." Frank met the mayor's gaze directly. "Actually, I do have a decision. I want to move forward with the youth center concept. The proposal is sound, the objectives align with values I believe in, and the timing seems right. My only condition is that we find ways to ensure the program remains accessible to all young people in Millfield, regardless of their background or resources." Chen's expression reflected genuine pleasure. "That condition aligns perfectly with the grant requirements and with my own priorities for the program. I'm delighted you're willing to take on this role. It means a great deal to the city, and he added with a hint of personal warmth, to my daughter as well. Olivia's enthusiasm for this project is unlike anything I've seen from her in years. She's been instrumental in shaping my thinking about it," Frank admitted. Her commitment to sharing knowledge, to making practical skills accessible to her peers, it's impressive in someone her age. "Yes, it is," Chen agreed, a flash of parental pride crossing his features. "And somewhat unexpected, given her previous academic focus. I've always encouraged her toward traditional professional paths, medicine or law or business. It never occurred to me that she might find fulfillment in, quote, more practical disciplines." Frank nodded, understanding the perspective. "There's value in all paths. The key is finding the one that resonates with your own capabilities and interests." "Indeed," Chen said thoughtfully. "A lesson I'm learning rather late, I'm afraid. But better late than never." He glanced at his watch, then stood. "I should get to my meeting. Would tomorrow afternoon work for you to meet with the grant administrator and begin the formal planning process? Say, 2 o'clock at City Hall?" "I'll be there," Frank confirmed, rising to shake Chen's hand. "And thank you for seeing potential in this garage beyond what it currently is. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to recognize possibilities we're too close to see for ourselves," Chen replied. "I'll have my assistant send over the meeting details. Until tomorrow, then." After Chen departed, Frank found himself standing in the center of his garage, seeing the familiar space with new eyes. The worn concrete floor, the aging equipment, the cramped work areas, all would be transformed in the coming months. Yet the essential character of the place, the spirit of honest work and problem-solving that had defined it for 20 years, would remain and expand, touching more lives than he had ever imagined possible. When Olivia arrived that afternoon, practically vibrating with excitement, Frank confirmed that he had accepted her father's proposal. Her response was immediate and uncharacteristically physical, a spontaneous hug that caught him by surprise but conveyed her genuine joy at the decision. "This is going to change everything," she declared, her eyes bright with possibilities. "Not just for you in the garage, but for so many students who never get the chance to learn practical skills. Dad called me right after your meeting. He said you specifically wanted to ensure the program would be accessible to everyone in Millfield. And that's important to me." Frank nodded. "Knowledge like this shouldn't be limited by zip code or family income." "I agree completely," Olivia said with conviction. "And I've been thinking about ways to make that happen, beyond just offering free or subsidized workshops. Transportation is a big issue for students from some neighborhoods, and scheduling needs to accommodate different family situations. I've started researching how other similar programs address these challenges." End quote. Her immediate engagement with the practical aspects of accessibility impressed Frank. It would have been easy for someone of her privileged background to overlook these barriers, but Olivia's thinking had already moved beyond the conceptual to the concrete implementation challenges. "You should bring those ideas to the planning meeting tomorrow," he suggested. "Your perspective as a student would be valuable to the grant administrators." Olivia's eyes widened. "Me? At the official planning meeting? Why not?" Frank asked. "This whole thing started with your workshop concept. You've earned a place at the table." The next day, Frank arrived at City Hall 15 minutes early, dressed in his cleanest work clothes, freshly pressed but still unmistakably the attire of a working mechanic. He had considered wearing something more formal, but decided that authenticity mattered more than conforming to bureaucratic expectations. If he was to serve as the bridge between the practical world of automotive repair and the institutional world of education, he should represent his trade honestly. Olivia met him in the grand marble lobby, herself having come directly from school, still in her Westridge uniform. The contrast between them might have been comic in another context, the grease-stained mechanic and the private school student preparing to discuss a joint educational initiative. But there was nothing humorous in Olivia's manner as she briefed him on the meeting participants, the grant requirements, and the key points they should emphasize. "Dad says the federal grant administrator is particularly interested in programs that provide pathways to skilled trades," she explained as they rode the elevator to the mayor's office. "Apparently there's growing recognition of the critical shortage of qualified mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and similar trades nationwide. Our program would address that gap directly." Frank nodded, impressed by her command of the relevant policy concerns. "You've done your research." "Of course," Olivia replied, as if thorough preparation was the only conceivable approach. "We need to be strategic about positioning the youth center to maximize its impact and sustainability." The meeting itself was more collaborative than Frank had anticipated. Rather than being presented with a predetermined plan for his approval, he found himself actively engaged in shaping the program's structure, curriculum, and outreach strategies. Meyer Chen facilitated the discussion with skillful neutrality, ensuring all perspectives were considered while maintaining focus on the core objectives. Most surprising to Frank was the deference shown to Olivia's contributions. Despite being the youngest person in the room by decades, her comments were received with genuine attention and respect. Her detailed proposals for addressing transportation barriers, her insights into effective instructional approaches for teenage learners, and her suggestions for partnership opportunities with local schools all significantly influenced the emerging program design. By the meeting's end, a clear vision had developed. Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center would offer a tiered program of instruction, from basic maintenance workshops open to all interested students to more intensive training for those considering careers in brass, automotive technology, The facility would include not only expanded garage space, but also a proper classroom, computer stations for technical research, and even a small library of automotive reference materials. Partnerships with local schools would ensure diverse participation, with transportation provided from designated pickup points throughout the city. Frank's role would evolve as well. While maintaining his repair business, he would also serve as the center's lead instructor and program director, with authority to hire additional teaching staff as the program expanded. The grant would fund his salary in this capacity, providing financial stability that had been elusive throughout his career as an independent mechanic. "This is really happening," he said to Olivia as they left City Hall, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the municipal plaza. "In 6 months, the garage will be something completely different." "Not completely different," Olivia corrected him. "The essence will be the same, a place where people learn to solve problems, to understand systems, to create order from chaos. The scale is changing, not the fundamental purpose." Frank smiled at her echo of their earlier conversation about what made mechanical work satisfying. "You're right. And speaking of learning, we still have a brake pad replacement waiting for us back at the garage. Educational center of the future or not, Mrs. Guzman needs her car by tomorrow morning." Olivia grinned, already reaching for her phone to call for her ride. "Then we'd better get to work. The future can wait until after we've fixed the brakes." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Architectural plans were developed for the garage expansion, permit applications submitted, contractors interviewed. Frank found himself in a whirlwind of meetings and decisions that pulled him away from his usual hands-on work more often than he was entirely comfortable with. Yet each step brought the youth center concept closer to reality, transforming abstract ideas into concrete plans with timelines and budgets. Throughout this process, Olivia remained deeply involved, balancing her school responsibilities with her commitment to the center's development. She attended planning meetings, reviewed curriculum drafts, and continued her daily visits to the garage, where she now functioned more as an assistant than a student, helping Frank manage the repair business while he dealt with the administrative demands of the new project. "You know," Frank commented one afternoon as they worked side by side on a water pump replacement, "when this center gets up and running, you could have an official role there, paid position, teaching the introductory workshops, helping develop the curriculum. You've earned it with all the work you're putting in now." Olivia looked up, a socket wrench poised in her hand. "Really? You think I'm qualified?" "More than qualified," Frank assured her. "You know the material. You communicate clearly. You connect well with other students. Those are the essential skills for teaching this kind of content. The rest is just practice and experience." "I'd like that," Olivia admitted, returning her attention to the water pump. "It would give me a chance to develop the program from the beginning, see it grow. And it would look pretty good on those college applications we talked about before." Frank chuckled. "Founding instructor at an innovative educational initiative? Yeah, I'd say that might catch an admissions officer's attention." As autumn deepened toward winter, news of the planned youth center spread throughout Millfield. The local newspaper ran a feature story, complete with photographs of Frank and Olivia working together in the garage and architectural renderings of the expanded facility. Community response was overwhelmingly positive, with several local businesses offering additional support, from donated tools and equipment to scholarship funds for students with financial need. More surprising to Frank was the reaction from his fellow mechanics across the city. Rather than viewing the center as potential competition, many expressed enthusiasm for a program that would train the next generation of automotive technicians. Several offered to serve as guest instructors for specialized topics, while others volunteered to provide internship opportunities for advanced students. "The skills gap is real," explained Eddie Ramirez, owner of a large repair shop on the west side of Millfield, during a meeting of the local Mechanics Association. "We're all struggling to find qualified technicians. Modern vehicles are complex systems, and the technology changes constantly. We need young people with both the technical knowledge and the problem-solving abilities to adapt to these changes. Frank's Center could help build that pipeline of talent." This professional endorsement reinforced Frank's confidence in the project's value. He had always taken pride in his work, but seeing it recognized as essential knowledge worth preserving and transmitting brought a deeper satisfaction. A sense that his decades of experience would have impact beyond the individual vehicles he had repaired. As the permit approvals came through and construction dates were set, Frank faced a practical challenge: how to maintain his repair business during the renovation period. The solution came from an unexpected quarter. Eddie Ramirez offered temporary space in his larger facility, allowing Frank to continue serving his regular customers while the original garage was expanded and upgraded. "It's an investment in the future of our trade," Eddie insisted when Frank tried to negotiate payment for the space. "Besides, I might learn a few things from having you around. Your reputation for diagnosing the problems others miss is well known among the old-school mechanics in town." This arrangement solved the immediate logistical problem, but it also created an opportunity for Frank to observe operations in a larger, more modern facility. Eddie's shop employed 10 technicians, used advanced diagnostic equipment, and handled a volume of repairs that dwarfed Frank's solo operation. Yet the fundamental approaches to problem-solving remained similar, reinforcing Frank's belief that the core mechanical intuition he wanted to teach transcended specific tools or technologies. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center took place on a crisp December morning, with Mayor Chen, several city council members, the federal grant administrator, and a small crowd of community supporters in attendance. Frank felt distinctly uncomfortable in the spotlight, particularly when asked to don a hard hat and pose with a ceremonial shovel alongside the mayor and Olivia. "Just pretend you're explaining a timing belt replacement," Olivia whispered as they positioned themselves for the photographers. "That focused expression you get when you're concentrating on a repair." The suggestion helped, giving Frank something concrete to visualize, as the cameras flashed and the mayor delivered remarks about the importance of practical skills education and community-based learning opportunities. When it was Frank's turn to speak, he kept his comments brief and direct, thanking those who had supported the project and emphasizing the center's commitment to accessibility for all Millfield students. "Knowledge gains value when it's shared," he concluded, unconsciously echoing a sentiment his mother had often expressed. "This center will be a place where sharing happens across generations, across neighborhoods, across backgrounds, where young people discover not just how cars work, but how they themselves work, what they're capable of creating and fixing with their own hands and minds." End quote. The applause that followed was gratifying, but what meant more to Frank was the quiet nod of approval from Olivia, standing at the edge of the small stage. Her opinion had become increasingly important to him over the past months, her perspective on the center's development, a valuable counterbalance to his own occasionally limited viewpoint. Construction began immediately after the ceremony, with the contracting team working through the holiday season to take advantage of mild weather. Frank split his time between Eddie's shop, where he continued his repair business, and the construction site, where he consulted on layout details and equipment installation. Olivia, on winter break from Westridge, divided her time similarly, learning from Eddie's technicians while helping Frank ensure the new facility would serve its educational purpose effectively. By mid-January, the basic structure of the addition was complete, a modern steel-framed building connected to the original brick garage by a glass-walled corridor that would serve as the center's main entrance. The expanded facility included 4 additional repair bays, a classroom equipped with smart technology for presentations and demonstrations, a student lounge, and even a small office for Frank in his new role as program director. "It's really taking shape," Olivia observed as they toured the construction site one Saturday afternoon. "I can already imagine students working in those bays, learning the same skills I've been learning from you." Frank nodded, still slightly overwhelmed by the transformation of his modest garage into this substantial educational facility. "It's bigger than I initially pictured, more formal, but still fundamentally your space," Olivia reminded him. "Your knowledge, your approach to teaching, that's what will define the center, not the building itself." This perspective helped ease Frank's occasional anxiety about the project's scale and visibility. Despite his growing comfort with the public aspects of the center's development, he remained essentially private in nature, more at ease with engines than with the administrative and promotional responsibilities that came with his new role. As winter gradually yielded to early spring, the construction entered its final phases. Equipment was installed, furnishings delivered, Technological systems tested. The original garage portion was renovated last, receiving updated systems while maintaining its essential character, the solid brick walls and wooden beams that had sheltered Frank's business for 2 decades. In late March, as the project neared completion, Frank received an unexpected visit at Eddie's shop. Robert Chen arrived without prior notice, dressed not in his usual mayoral attire, but in casual clothes, a subtle signal that this was a personal, rather than official visit. "Do you have a few minutes?" Chen asked, glancing around the busy repair facility. "I'd like to discuss something regarding Olivia and the center." Frank wiped his hands on a shop rag, nodding to Eddie, who was working nearby. "Let's go to the break room. Quieter there." Once they were seated at the small table in the shop's modest break area, Chen came directly to the point. "Olivia has informed me that she wants to pursue automotive technology as her college major, with the goal of eventually specializing in electric and hybrid vehicle systems. She's already researching programs and considering early applications to technical institutes rather than the liberal arts universities we had previously discussed." Frank wasn't entirely surprised by this development. Olivia's increasing interest in automotive systems had been evident for months, her questions becoming more technical, her independent research more focused on emerging technologies in the field. Still, he recognized that this represented a significant shift from the educational path Chen had likely envisioned for his daughter. "I see," Frank said carefully. "And how do you feel about this change in direction?" Chen smiled slightly, recognizing the diplomatic response. "Initially, I was concerned. Like many parents of my generation and background, I had certain expectations about appropriate professional paths: medicine, law, business, perhaps engineering if one is technically inclined. Automotive technology was not on that list." End quote. Frank nodded, understanding the perspective, while not necessarily sharing it. "And now?" "Now, I find myself reevaluating those assumptions," Chen admitted. "Watching Olivia these past months, seeing her engagement with the material, her natural aptitude for both the technical aspects and the instructional components, I've had to question my predetermined notions of suitable careers. The joy she finds in this work is undeniable, as is her talent for it." "She does have a gift," Frank agreed, "both for understanding systems and for explaining them to others. That combination is rare and valuable." "Yes, it is," Chen nodded thoughtfully, "and increasingly relevant as transportation technologies evolve. Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. Olivia mentioned that you had suggested she might have a formal role at the center once it opens, perhaps as an instructor for introductory workshops." "I did," Frank confirmed. "She's more than capable, and having a younger instructor might help some students relate to the material more easily." "I agree completely," Chen said. "In fact, I'd like to expand on that concept. The grant includes funding for a scholarship program, supporting students who wish to pursue further education in automotive technology after completing the center's basic courses. I'm proposing that we establish a specific scholarship for young women entering the FERCR field, and that we name it after Olivia, recognizing her role in the center's creation." End quote. The suggestion caught Frank by surprise. "That's a significant honor. Has Olivia agreed to this?" "I haven't discussed it with her yet," Chen admitted. "I wanted to consult with you first, ensure that you felt it appropriate given your role as the center's primary founder and director. The last thing I want is to appear to be using my position as mayor to claim undue recognition." "For my daughter?" Frank appreciated the sensitivity behind this concern. "I think it's entirely appropriate," he said honestly. "Without Olivia's initiative, none of this would have happened. She was the catalyst that transformed a struggling repair shop into an educational center. Recognizing that contribution through a scholarship that will help others follow a similar path seems fitting to me." Chen's expression reflected genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Frank. Your endorsement means a great deal. And if I may say so, your influence on my daughter's development over these past months has been profoundly positive. You've helped her discover capabilities and passions she might never have recognized otherwise." "She did the same for me," Frank replied simply. "Helped me see potential in my work and knowledge that I had begun to overlook. That's how real teaching works, I think. It's never just one-directional. The official opening of the Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center took place on a perfect spring day in early April. The renovated facility gleamed in the morning sunlight, the original brick structure now seamlessly integrated with the modern addition. A large crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, including city officials, educational partners, community supporters, and most importantly, prospective students from across Millfield. Mayor Chen's remarks emphasized the center's dual mission, providing practical skills education for all interested young people and creating pathways to careers in automotive technology for those who discovered DASN. A passion for the field. He highlighted the various partnerships that would support these objectives, from transportation arrangements with local schools to internship opportunities with repair shops throughout the city. When it was Frank's turn to speak, he kept his comments characteristically brief but heartfelt. This center exists because a curious teenager wanted to learn how to change oil, he said, smiling at Olivia who stood nearby. That simple request led to conversations, which led to ideas, which led to action. Today we open not just a building, but a continuous conversation about how things work, how they can be fixed when they break, and how understanding these processes gives us power over our own environments." End quote. The mayor then announced the establishment of the Olivia Chen Scholarship for Women in Automotive Technology, catching both Olivia and many in the audience by surprise. As Chen explained the scholarship's purpose and criteria, Olivia's expression transformed from shock to deep emotion, tears welling in her eyes as she absorbed the significance of this recognition. Following the formal ceremony, the center hosted an open house, with demonstrations of basic maintenance procedures, tours of the facility, and information sessions about upcoming workshop series and more intensive DAS training programs. Frank moved through the crowd, answering questions, explaining equipment functions, encouraging interested young people to register for the inaugural classes scheduled to begin the following week. As the event wound down, he found Olivia in the original garage section, showing a group of middle school girls how to check tire pressure and fluid levels. Her explanation was clear and engaging, her manner patient as she guided each girl through the proper technique. The scene embodied everything Frank had hoped the center would represent: knowledge being shared across generations, practical skills being valued and preserved, young people discovering their own capabilities through hands-on learning. When the last visitors had departed and the center staff, mostly former interns and apprentices from Frank's network, had completed the cleanup, Frank and Olivia found themselves alone in the main garage area. The space was quiet now, the tools put away, the demonstration vehicles parked neatly in their designated bays. Yet there was a sense of potential energy in the air, of possibilities waiting to unfold in the days and weeks ahead. "So," Frank said, leaning against a workbench, "how does it feel to have a scholarship named after you before you've even graduated high school?" Olivia shook her head, still processing the day's events. "Surreal. Overwhelming. I never expected anything like that. When Dad announced it, I thought I might actually pass out from shock." "You deserve the recognition," Frank told her sincerely. "None of this would exist without your curiosity and persistence. That first day, when you asked to learn about oil changes, you set something in motion that's grown beyond what either of us could have imagined." "We both did," Olivia corrected him. "Your willingness to teach, to take a random teenager seriously, that was just as important. Most adults would have dismissed me or given some superficial demonstration. You treated my interest with respect from the raw beginning." Frank nodded, acknowledging the truth in her assessment. "I suppose we make a good team that way. Your questions, my answers. Your ideas, my experience. Together, something neither of us could have created alone." "A partnership," Olivia suggested, smiling. "Like the one Dad proposed for the center itself." "Exactly," Frank agreed. "And speaking of partnerships, we should probably start planning the curriculum for next week's first official workshop. 20 students registered already, according to the coordinator. 20 students who might discover something about themselves they never knew before," Olivia said thoughtfully. "Just like I did, watching your garage from across the street. wondering if I could ever understand how cars really work. As they moved toward the new classroom to begin their planning, Frank reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them to this point. From a struggling mechanic facing possible closure of his business, to the director of an innovative educational center. From a shy, uncertain teenager, to a confident young woman with clear direction and purpose. Neither transformation had been predictable, yet both had unfolded naturally from one simple act of connection, of knowledge offered and received across the divides of age, background, and experience. The Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center would serve hundreds, perhaps thousands of young people in the years to come. Some would gain basic maintenance skills that would save them money and provide self-reliance throughout their lives. Others would discover vocations that would shape their educational and career paths. All would experience the unique satisfaction of understanding how things work, of creating order from chaos, of solving problems with their own hands and minds. And it had all begun with a simple invitation. You interested in cars? Pretty interesting job, if you want to come take a closer look. In that moment, neither Frank Rodriguez nor Olivia Chen could have imagined where that invitation would lead. A struggling mechanic teaching a curious teen to change oil, unaware she was the mayor's daughter. A shy teenager watching a garage from across the street, unaware her interest would transform not just her own life, but an entire community's approach to practical education. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest connections, Frank reflected, as he watched Olivia arrange chairs in the classroom that would soon welcome its first official students. The simple kindness of taking someone's interest seriously, of sharing knowledge freely, of recognizing potential where others might see only limitations. These actions, seemingly insignificant in the moment, can set in motion ripples of transformation that expand far beyond their original boundaries, touching lives and creating possibilities that no one could have predicted. As Frank joined Olivia at the classroom's central workbench, preparing materials for the inaugural workshop, he felt a deep sense of rightness, of having found a purpose that honored his past while creating something new and valuable for the future. The center would evolve, adapting to changing technologies and educational needs, but its essential mission would remain constant, connecting generations through shared knowledge, empowering young people through practical skills, creating a community where curiosity was valued and capability cultivated. And at its heart would remain the simple truth that had brought them to this point. Everyone deserves the opportunity to understand the systems that surround them, to develop the confidence that comes from creating and fixing with their own hands, to experience the satisfaction of solving problems through knowledge, patience, and skill. These weren't just mechanical lessons, but life lessons, applicable far beyond the garage, valuable in every aspect of human experience. As the sun set on the Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center's first official day, casting long shadows through the tall windows of the new facility, Frank Rodriguez and Olivia Chen continued their preparations. Two teachers readying themselves to share what they had learned with others who would soon begin their own journeys of discovery. Different in age, background, and experience, they were united by a shared passion for knowledge and a commitment to its transmission, creating between them a bridge that others could cross, connecting past wisdom to future possibility, practical skill to personal transformation. And in that connection lay the true power of education, not merely the transfer of information, but the awakening of capability, the recognition of potential, the creation of confidence where uncertainty had prevailed. One oil change, one spark plug replacement, one diagnostic procedure at a time, building competence that extended beyond the specific task to a broader sense of agency and possibility. This was the gift that Frank had offered Olivia months earlier, and that they now prepared to offer others. The knowledge that, with the right tools, proper guidance, and willing hands, what seems broken can be fixed. What appears mysterious can be understood. What feels overwhelming can be approached step by step, component by component, until order emerges from chaos and capability replaces doubt. In a world of increasing complexity and specialization, such knowledge had never been more valuable. And in the transformed garage at the corner of Elm and Mason Streets, that knowledge would find a home a place of preservation and transmission, ensuring that the practical wisdom of generations would not be lost but renewed, not diminished but expanded, not confined to a single mechanic's experience, but shared with all who sought to understand the fundamental processes that shaped their daily lives. As night fell over Millfield, the lights of the Rodriguez Youth Automotive Center remained on, illuminating the path for those who would soon arrive, seeking knowledge that would change not just their understanding of vehicles, but their perception of themselves, their capabilities, and their potential to transform the world around them, one repair, one improvement, one solution at a time.